The Kaupapa Maori Research Fund was a new one for me. To Reader's Digest this government department, taxpayers are forking out for science projects applying Maori knowledge to natural hazards. At an initial scan at their website, the biggies, the holders of the knowledge, possess are in the fields of natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis, leading many Christchurch viewers like me to ask, where the F were you in 2011? I have long advocated, and will continue to do so, that science is incompatible with religion. Science is a world thing, and doesn't cease to exist at the boundaries of your border or territorial waters. We don't talk about New Zealand science as a separate entity, nor say Japanese science, Icelandic science, or Dutch science. It's just friggin' science. Compare and consider this to religion and superstitious belief. Say the in-house schisms between Shia and Shiite within Islam to start kicking that can down the road. We soon realise putting together the teachings of Buddha and L. Ron Hubbard under the loose heading religion is conceptually impossible. Religion is all over the place. On the other hand, the global network of scientists in any given field haggle amongst themselves and finally agree with each other, come to a conclusion that looks about as good as we can get it for now, accepting fully that someone could come along and wash their sandcastle away. More often, though, build on it. There is no sole holder of the knowledge, if you live overseas, that is. I am equally fervent science is incompatible with, say, the fables of Aesop and tales from the Brothers Grimm, and same for Maori myths like Tane Mahuta. Gods of the forest like Tane aren't at all that unusual. The Finns, for example, have a similar god called Tapio, son of Anarchy. As far as I'm aware, the Finnish government don't have any plans in the near future to bus children to an exhibition that ties in their existence to the landscape environment of today. Teach Finnish malleable minds, if you get lost in the bush, praying to either god of the forest is better than dialing the police on your cell phone and keeping yourself warm and staying put. This is one way of pointing out myths and legends are all over the place, often specific to where you were born, and like religion, legends and science are incompatible, at least in most countries, not New Zealand. They are now so intertwined as to be indistinguishable. Next year, New Zealand children will be getting taught the equivalent of Tapio alongside the periodic table. This process has already begun, and I will be doing regular acerbic videos on this subject matter when more comes out in the coming months. The signs, though, are rather ominous from the little peek we've been given. One that got my attention at this early stage, and before I get to the overbearing mandate, is the plan next year to bus the slim majority of Melbourne children who actually go to school to Rangatani House in the centre of Blenheim to learn Tanafa, mythical serpent-like creatures created tsunamis. Listen to allegories in the same vein as Little Red Riding Hood. Don't go down to the beach when there's a 30-metre wave rolling in. Don't talk to weird hairy strangers with fangs. I'm not making any of this up. Rather than pouring scorn on stories of water spirits, the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research is not just embracing this, at best, allegory. They are the one partnering that Blenheim exhibition. When we have superstition mating with science, their ugly love child is pseudo-science, or in popular vernacular, Voodoo science. Getting away from Kim John Illing, Kiwi Kids, looking at this from top to bottom now, no one seems to raise an eyebrow what NIWA, the state environmental arm, is portraying. In this particular case, seismic traditions are equal to seismic science. Maori legends explaining the origins of earthquakes on the Shaky Isles are on par with the ones telling us it's the tectonic plates. Kaupapa Maori research in Niwa suggest we can learn how Maori responded to disasters and employ the same methods today. Apparently. The specifics of which I'm unable to grasp or even Google. No one's written a paper on the subject I could locate in order that the public who fund this, and a Chilean in the same field, can examine and critique the contents other than the reasonable conclusion, the open-ended and reptilian brain reaction, run like Billy-O inland if you see a huge wave coming your way. Worryingly, these are surely the very same scientists that you would think are here to shield the publics from such nonsense, or as far as I'm concerned, preferably not engage opening the box marked superstition. On the other hand, if your job boils down to milking the cow of cultural relativity for all it's worth, Niwa should fully embrace the Maori-centric view, not beat about the bush here.
Go full retard.
Burn those colonialists' tramping huts to the ground. Tell the public the country doesn't need to replace those recently flogged tsunami sirens, that they are superfluous. An ambulance at the bottom of the hill approach. The future for Aotearoa is to stem the oceanic earthquakes occurring in the first place, dealing to them once and for all. Time to call in the Navy. Put to better use the sophisticated radar system installed to hunt submarines and track surface vessels, and if that machinery of the colonialists fails to turn up a swimming dragon or two, use what are now termed indigenous methodologies to search the oceans instead. Crew our navy vessels with a tauhanga, Maori experts in the field of mythical creatures, and hunt them to extinction. End of problem. And imagine the funding you'd get for that. Before you think this is an utterly ludicrous proposition, in 2011 a taniwha called Horotau held up work on Auckland's CBD rail link for months. And speak to someone from Hamilton and say the words bridge and taniwha together and watch them go from 0 to 10 in less than 5 seconds. Who cares if your fraternity becomes a global laughingstock? That happened long ago, before that flotilla of recreational vessels escorted the frigate Te Mana out of Devonport Harbour, towing a large net in her wake. If Kaupapa Maori and science are compatible, get the boffins at Kaupapa Maori Research together and come up with a fairy catcher. Offer a bounty and supply a toll-free number, 1800 local iwi, when you trap one at the bottom of the garden. Friendly warning, they can bite. I find hydrocortisone is quite effective. Looking at the calibre of the partners who are in on this weaving together of modern science and Maori Purauka myths, weaving together being an Orwellian newspeak term in the same sense as a wraparound. There's no engine under the bonnet of either term. As at the hunt at sea, why not up the ante and not just claim, as in the Blenheim Blather, where, rather bizarrely if you ask me, Maori had a preternatural connection to diatoms, of all things, leading to elaborate art installations the public purse is paying for. Remind us of what are diatoms again? Those tiny microscopic light-absorbing molecules in water. They have been about since the Jurassic period and were officially discovered in 1700. Diatoms, though, a bit naff if you ask me. They don't quite hold the public's attention, nor will they get children off computers, as would, say, a nationwide fairy hunt. 1 or 2 of those new species of diatoms get discovered weekly. Hardly going to set the world of science on fire finding a new one in New Zealand. These partners really need to get their sights aimed higher into the voracious need to jigsaw Maori myths into science. There's a third part to this plan, one that I'm sure will catapult New Zealand science into the minds of the public wandering the streets from Madrid to Madras. Allow those without a Defence Force budget to get amongst this. Moihau. Now we're really talking. New Zealand Sasquatches that are said to exist on the Coromantel, at least according to Maori oral tradition from the area, and that alone means we're at third base in New Zealand in academic and scientific circles. axiomatic Maori oral history. In this case, oral history being the equivalent of finding the body of a moihau, photographing, x-raying and doing an autopsy on the beast, and simply be awaiting the final DNA test to dot the I's. Who cares if a colonialist anthropologist overseas pours scorn on what is little more than a bad episode from Finding Bigfoot? They haven't lived in New Zealand for 700 years to gain the knowledge the locals have. The unique methodology New Zealand Science employs is different. We work backwards here, retrofitting a story into science, in the same fashion as creationist scientists do with claims the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Blenheim is a perfect example of this in action. I'm now getting into the groove of how all this works. Let me start by really getting into the moihau urauka swing of things. Get that ball rolling. Give job security to many a Kiwi academic in 2023 and decades to come. Decolonize science in Aotearoa once and for all. My starter for 10 on the moihau. What say when applying for expedition funding you claim a moihau with the remnants of a proto-Asian humanoid?
Denisovans.
Walk well and truly across that bridge between the world of science and Mātauranga Maori. Your paper will get cryptozoologists salivating, as long as they can interpret te reo. At the same time, you can bolster your university or institution's coffers by getting a lucrative deal with the Discovery Channel. And too late, by the way. I've already beaten you to registering that particular name. That huge list of partners we saw can wipe the smug smiles of condemnation off the faces of overseas scientists who would rather have something more solid, like remains and evidence, that sort of thing. With the Denisovan claims, Aotearoa can instantly become world leaders in decolonized science. Pity it's a league table of one. What have New Zealand academics got to lose at this point? I mean, given their low and plummeting global ranks, it's not as if anyone overseas takes that much notice of what comes out of New Zealand University these days anyway. It's been a couple of decades since University in New Zealand were considered leading or top class. Auckland scrapes into the top 100 but is on the slide globally. Otago makes it into the top 200 by 6 places and is also sinking downwards. Wellington and Canterbury place in the mid-200s. Lincoln and Waikato are teetering or sinking into the 400s. Massey sits alongside Moscow State Technical University. Waikato is considered below the University of Philippines and St. Petersburg Polytechnic. The top 20 universities in China all rank ahead of Auckland AUT. What is the solution to stem the decline in standards? Introduce academic rigor? Question mark. Or dare I suggest, shock horror, setting higher standards? Nah. Plans are afoot so that by 2030 all New Zealand university students will have a compulsory paper in their first year. English would be wishful thinking. Mātauranga Maori. Time to don the bush shirt, stock the tramping bag and let the moihonga hunt begin. Those of you tuning in with a boat may want to upgrade the rod and tackle to serpent breaking strength. Just remember, there's a current bag limit of 3 in the Hauraki Gulf. Bye for now.